Hey, welcome back to the series where I talk about the Fazbear Frights books. As you can see today, I am the man behind the slaughter. And today we're going to be talking about Fetch, the second book in the series. If you haven't seen the first video, I mean, that's okay. You do whatever you want with your time. It's fine. But, you might want to check it out. Or you can just watch Donko's video on it. Okay, but today we're going to be reading, we're going to be looking at Fetch. All three stories. I don't want to waste your time. I want to get to the meat of this. I'm going to say it again because I have a feeling someone's going to mention this. Yes, these books have been out for a few months, but I've been really looking forward to talking about them. I kind of wanted to do it once all the books were released, but now, now apparently we're getting 9 of them, at least, so I think I'm just going to do it now, which I probably should have done from the start. So, I'm trying to catch up. This is Fetch, as I already said many times. So let's just jump right into the first story, Fetch. So, in the first story, right, let me just give you a brief summary. I do have audiobooks on my second channel for these books, so if you want to go a bit more in-depth into what this story is, you can go there, you can listen to the whole thing, with my soothing voice, guiding you through the whole way. But we're gonna get into a quick summary, just in case, you don't have the time for that. And so, what happens in this story is we meet Greg, right? And Greg is he's kind of a nerd, okay? He's really obsessed with, let me try to explain it. So the first thing that he's really interested in is this thing called the 0-point field, right? And the 0-point field is basically... Here, let me actually get what it says from the book. Let me actually find this. In quantum physics, there's this something known as the 0-point field. This field is scientific proof that there is no such thing as a vacuum, no such thing as nothingness. If you empty all space of matter and energy, you still find, in subatomic terms, a bunch of activity. This constant activity is a field of energy that's always in motion, subatomic matter constantly interacting with other subatomic matter. This energy is called the 0-point field because fluctuations in the field are still found in temperatures of absolute zero. Absolute zero is the lowest possible energy state where everything's been removed and there should be nothing remaining to make any motion. So the energy should be zero, but when they measure the energy, mathematically it never actually reaches zero. It's very confusing. And so this on its own doesn't mean anything for our story, right? But then the other thing that they talk about later is this thing called a random event generator, or REG. And what it does is it generates a random number. And so what they're trying to study here, or what Greg is trying to figure out, is if you can make REGs have the result that you want. So let's say you have a machine, and it spits out a 1 or a 0, and he's trying to use his mind to influence the 0-point field and make it have a 1 instead of a 0. And what you find out through the story is that the animatronic in this story, Fetch, might have an REG. Inside of him might be an REG, and so he is capable of almost reading Greg's thoughts. It's all very sci-fi. It's very sci-fi, and it feels like this book is, again, trying to kind of point this series in a more science fiction direction, kind of like Sister Location did, or Sister Location did. And so Greg finds Fetch in an abandoned pizzeria, right? Obviously Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria. He finds this little prize dog called Fetch, and he syncs up with your phone, and he gets things for you, which is weird because he was made in the 80s, so there should be no possible way that he can sync up with your phone. So obviously, it's not just sci-fi, there's something a bit more paranormal here. And so Fetch will bring him things, but Fetch seems to take his requests very literally. Like, he'll say, because he and his uncle had this running joke about his uncle's magic finger of luck. It's very lame, but he'll and so he texts his uncle and he says, "Hey, I could really use the magic finger of luck right now." And then Fetch, rips off his uncle's finger and brings it to his doorstep. Like a good dog. And so, obviously, this happens several times throughout the story, just kind of showing you how Fetch is very powerful, and definitely not just a normal robot. He's very paranormal. The other thing is, I like what the story does. The story does, it takes a lot of time showing you that it's almost impossible to stop Fetch. I mean, at one point, Greg literally destroys Fetch with a baseball bat. Just brutally smacks it over and over again with a baseball bat. And it seems to put itself back together later. So this story goes way out of its way to show that Fetch is very OP and probably indestructible. And so it kind of gives a sense of hopelessness. The story ends very abruptly with one of Greg's classmates. It's assumed that she's dead. It's assumed. We never actually, see a body, but it's... The story itself it makes a fair amount of sense. Once you understand, like, the science stuff behind it, then it makes a lot of sense. But once you get to... And now we're going to start going into spoilers for future books, because one of the cool things about doing this later, after this book has come out, and after a few more books has come out, is you can kind of look back on it with a bit more of understanding. And so again, spoilers. In the third book, the one right after this, it's revealed that Fetch, his power box, I believe, is inside the Stitchwraith, along with an endoskeleton, and together, they're kind of powering the Stitchwraith. And so, it's revealed that this kid named Andrew, it seems his soul is inside of Fetch. We don't know how it got there. We don't know who this Andrew kid is. I don't think he's been mentioned before in the series. He's just there. And in book 4, once again, we're talking, Fetch is brought up again. So he seems to be a very important character in this series. So in the 4th book, we have this kid named Jake, right? And he finds out that he's inside the Stitchwraith. So he's probably dead. And he's possessing the Stitchwraith. And there's this other kid possessing it with him, and they can both talk to each other, but Andrew can't see anything. Jake can see stuff because he's in the endoskeleton, but Andrew can't because he's in the Fetch power box, which doesn't have any eyes, obviously. And Andrew is very, very hostile. He's very aggressive. And what he says is, yes, okay, so his memories are fuzzy, but he says, I do remember wanting to get back at someone who hurt me. I think I attached myself to him. I got into his soul, made sure he couldn't move on when he should have died. I remember I wanted him to suffer the way he made me suffer. But I don't remember what he did. I just know I hung on, no matter what they did to him, to try and save him. I wanted him to hurt. So yeah, he's very pleasant. A very nice kid. Yes, okay, here we go. I can remember being all over the place in all kinds of things. Andrew says this. And I remember this animatronic dog, Fetch. He broke down in a thunderstorm. Sucky toy, not made well. So I think I was in Fetch, sort of. I think that's how I got here. I don't know why I think that, I just do. So, this is super confusing. Andrew is in Fetch, and Fetch apparently broke down in a thunderstorm. We never see that in the story. There's a thunderstorm that's going on for like several days, it seems, but Fetch never breaks down inside of it, unless Greg hitting him with a baseball bat counts as breaking him down. That sure seems like it would. But Fetch is perfectly fine after that because he still is harassing Greg. So what's weird is we don't know where Andrew came from. We don't know how he got in Fetch. We don't know what happened to Fetch after the story Fetch ended. I hope I'm making sense, but like, there's a gap here between when Fetch ends and when the Stitchwraith story starts. Something happens in between there where Phineas gets Fetch, and Fetch apparently is broken. So we don't really know how he broke. Probably the baseball bat, but again, it seems like he repairs himself because the parts of him disappear. One interesting thing is when they find Fetch in the pizzeria. Above the spot where Fetch is, there is a stain on the roof. It's never explained what this is. We never find out. I don't know if it's important at all. but there's a stain. Presumably blood or something. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but I really doubt it. I think it's probably important. But yeah, this story is so good, though. It's so brutal, because Fetch, again, they go out of their way to show how Fetch, he cannot be destroyed. You can't get rid of him. Which, again, you know, it feels like a very paranormal thing. And now, he's in the Stitchwraith, so he's not gone. He's still around, and definitely is up to something. But I guess we'll find out what that is later. I'm really curious. I'm gonna give Fetch like a 9.5 out of 10. Maybe a 10. No, 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our second story. Lonely Freddy. This one is very much more slow-paced, similar to like To Be Beautiful or something, but it's actually, you know, good. I made it very clear that I don't like To Be Beautiful very much. It's very slow-paced, but it's good because it doesn't really focus on being scary. It focuses on being sad, which, you know, is great. And so it introduces us to these siblings, Alec and Hazel. And Hazel is kind of like the perfect child, right? She's the one who is always perfect. She does what their parents ask, and she's always, you know, very nice to everyone. Whereas Alec, he's not really... He feels... kind of overlooked by his parents. And so he's jealous of Hazel, and he doesn't like her. Yes, okay. So one day she brings him the book that their parents are using to try and, I guess, make Alec a better person. She brings him the book, and then they start to form this alliance against their parents. And that goes on for a lot of the story until they have a birthday party for Hazel at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Now, the thing about Alec is he always wanted to have a birthday party at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but he was never able to. Because he never had enough friends to warrant a party to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It would be like maybe 1 or 2 people. But Hazel goes there every year, and it's revealed that the reason she does that is because she knows that he likes Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, especially Foxy. He's his favorite character. And so she tries to win a toy for him. And in the end, she gives this toy to him, and he's... At this point, he's kind of gone back to being who he was at the start of the story. He's jealous of her again because he realizes that this was all a trick so that she could give him this toy. And he's been being played this whole time. And so he's annoyed by that, he's angry by that, and he rips the arm off of the Foxy plush, and he runs to the back room. And this is where we kind of get our first good look at the actual animatronic for this story, and it's with like only 20 pages left. Lonely Freddy. We see him before in the story, but he's just on, I think he was just like on a sort of pedestal stage thing. He wasn't doing anything, he was just kind of staring at Alec. But later on here, he sees a Lonely Freddy in the back room where he runs off, Alec. And it starts to ask him questions. And this is right after Alec is like, oh man, I've been so mean, I should change my ways. And then he meets this Lonely Freddy, and the Lonely Freddy starts asking him questions. He asks him stuff like, you know, what's your favorite color, what's your favorite food, what's your best subject in school, all these sorts of things. And then it starts to take a different turn, and he asks him, what would you do if you were asked to hurt someone you love? The weird thing about this question is that Alec never actually answers it, that we see. It kind of glosses over it and goes to a different question, which is weird. What's your biggest regret? And all of a sudden, Alec, and you can kind of see where this is going, right? He's asking him these questions, and then Alec starts to feel funny. He starts to feel different. It says, fundamentally different, that's all it says. And so, you know, it's pretty obvious. He's in the Lonely Freddy now. He's inside of it. He's body swapped with the Lonely Freddy. And so he manages to make it out of the room, back into the main room. And he sees himself there. He sees his own body, now controlled by the Lonely Freddy, sort of making amends with his sister. Only, obviously, it's not Alec. Alec is trapped in the bear. And then after he kind of gets knocked over a couple times by some kids, an employee comes and carries him over to a dumpster and locks the dumpster, and there's a bunch of other Lonely Freddys, dozens of them, all there screaming for help. And it ends like, here, let me read what it says in the ending. So he's in the dumpster, the door is, the kind of lid has just been locked shut, and he says, "Help," he thought he heard himself say. Then he realized it hadn't been him at all. It had been the bear beside him in the bin. Then it was the bear on the other side of him. Pretty soon it was every bear in the bin, their thin, muted screams for help, swallowed by the metal and darkness that entombed them. Alec and his new friends. Dozens of the lonely ones. And that's when the story ends. And so, it's probably, at this point in the series, the saddest one. I think there's other really sad ones later on, but this is definitely the saddest one for now. The weird thing, right, is that, here, let me go find it. What I think, okay, and what a lot of other people have suggested as well, is that the Lonely Freddys aren't just normal robots, right, who body swap with kids. They are, what I think it is it's a system. It's a system, right? So you have a kid, and you have a Lonely Freddy. The Lonely Freddy body swaps with the kid, and then you have this Lonely Freddy who's possessed by a kid now, right? Another kid comes along, and they body swap again. Now this new kid is possessing the Golden Freddy, and it keeps going, it keeps cycling through. New kids going through the Lonely Freddy each time. The only problem I can really think of with that theory is that, you would think that the kids would try to go back to their old families, when they get out of the Lonely Freddys, when they body swap with another kid, and it kind of cycles through. You'd think they would want to go back to their old families and try and convince them that they're the same kid. It probably wouldn't work. I mean, imagine you find this kid, walk up to your house, and they say that they're actually your long-lost child. Only it's not your long-lost child, because your child is still around. They've just been acting extra nice lately. And then this new kid comes along and says, "No, actually, I'm your kid." So yeah, I don't know. What I think it is that it's a cycle. So new kids come through the Lonely Freddys, and old kids are pushed out into new bodies. I could be completely wrong. It's just a wacky theory that I have, but it's interesting. Other than that, there's not much to talk about in this story. It's really sad. I definitely give it, probably an 8 out of 10. 8.5 maybe, because it's really good, but it does take a long, it does take a long time to get to the action, but I don't mind, because then I can focus a lot on the characters. If it didn't focus on the characters, right, the story wouldn't be sad at the ending. But it really does focus on the characters, and so you are sad by the ending. And I think that's probably a good call. Okay, so let's move on to the final story, and then we'll go to the Stitchwraith. The final story is Out of Stock. And so this one is all about a kid named Oscar, and he's always helping out his mom, right? His mom, ever since his dad, I believe, died, he's been helping out his mom a lot more, and he's starting to get a bit upset with that, because it means that he can't really do as much as he would want to do. He's always having to help out his mom, and he can't ever really spend time for himself. And so, the one thing that he really wants, right, is this thing called a plush trap chaser. So it's not a normal plush trap. This is a mass-produced toy. It's being sold in stores everywhere, and he really wants one. But just his luck, it's sold out, and he doesn't get one. He heads to the mall where they're being sold with his friends, and it's sold out. He gets to the front of the line right as the last one is sold, but he sees something in the back of the store, and what he sees is a plush trap chaser, but it has human eyes and teeth. So, we'll get to that. I have an interesting theory that I don't think anyone else has really talked about that. But we'll get to that. And so, long story short, he steals it. I mean, he doesn't really steal it, because he leaves the money for it. But what happens is the employees tell him they're not selling that one, because something's wrong with it. Obviously, the organs inside of it. And so he runs away with it, he gives them the money, so it's not technically stealing, but it's also, it kind of is. And so he and his friends, they make it home, and it doesn't work. Right? It doesn't work. The plush trap chaser is defective. There's a storm that happens, right? And so during the storm, he is trying to activate it. He's trying to get it to work, get it to function properly, and it's not working. But then they realize, its whole functionality is it moves in the dark and it freezes in the light, and they've been trying to set it up with the lights on the whole time. And so, and then his mom calls him. And when his mom calls him, she's asking if he can help her out at the nursing home. Only problem is, it's at Halloween, which he was really looking forward to, and he wanted to hang out with his friends on Halloween, and go trick-or-treating. And so at this point, he thought he had the plush trap, and now it isn't working. And even though they haven't tried it yet to see if it works in the dark, he's mad at his mom, and he yells at her, and they get into a short fight, but then the power goes out. And so the phone call, it's ended, and now it's dark inside. It's dark. It's very dark, and the plush trap, which at this point is upstairs, because he's in the phone in a different room, he hears thumping from upstairs. He and his friends hear thumping going on. And so it turns out, now the plush trap is active. It's active, and it's running around, and it's trying to kill them. And so it's running through the house towards them, and it's cutting through doors and stuff. It's a really good action scene. It's like chomping through doors with its human teeth. And the weird thing is, it says the teeth are bleeding. Why? We don't know. But again, I'll get to that later, because I do have an interesting theory about it. So the teeth are bleeding, and he's cutting through the doors. And so Oscar and his friends are desperately trying to escape this thing. They get some flashlights, multiple flashlights, all of them which die really quickly, by the way. And so they get all these flashlights, they die quickly. They do stop him when they're pointing the flashlight at him, but they're dying really fast, and so it's not working. And they eventually run outside. They try to get to the train tracks across the street, because the power is still on across the train tracks, because that's where kind of the rich people live, and for some reason their power never goes out. So they're trying to get across the train tracks, but it's very clear that the plush trap he's gonna catch up with them. He's very fast, he's gonna catch up with them. And so as they make it to the train tracks, Oscar has an idea. It's risky, but what he does is he runs across the train tracks, and the plush trap chaser is hit by an oncoming train. And so Oscar, he tumbles to the side. He gets up. His friends are like, "Oh man, are you okay? That was nuts." And they see the plush trap destroyed on the train tracks. And after that, it seems like Oscar is totally fine with helping his mom all the time. And so he makes it up to her, and he admits that he stole the plush trap chaser, because earlier she had kind of accused him of stealing it from the mall, and he admits to it now. And the story ends very happily. The only happy ending in this book. But what's weird, again, is the plush trap. Because again, he has human eyes and human teeth. Why does he? We don't know. We have no idea. What I'm thinking is that he is alive. We've seen living animatronics before. What I theorized about in the first book, Into the Pit, is that this guy is alive. Because it says, again, his eyes... Does it say that they're... I'm pretty sure it says that they're alive. They're squishy, right? Yeah, okay. So it says, Oswald hit its head with his fists, scratched at its eyes, which didn't feel like a living creature's eyes. Okay, so I'm wrong about that. It's not alive. And yet it probably is, because what it says is that it also has fangs. It says... What does it say? Yeah, okay, so it has fangs, and it hangs itself, so obviously it is alive, and yet it's kind of in this zone between alive and animatronic, because its eyes feel plasticky, or, plasticky, and yet it has fangs. It's acting like a living thing, and it hangs itself. And so I do think it's still alive, but just in this kind of zone between being alive and not. And I do think that the Plushtrap Chaser is a similar story. I think it's kind of a hybrid, a living / not living hybrid, similar to Spring Bonnie from Into the Pit. And because when it's cutting through the doors, right, with its teeth start to bleed, which definitely seems to suggest that it's alive. And you know, the eyes, they don't feel plasticky for the plush trap, they feel organic, squishy, and when it's run over, you can see little pieces of gum on the track, the train tracks. So I do think it's alive, but also in this kind of gray area between alive and not. We don't know where it came from. We have no idea where the Plushtrap Chaser came from. I like having answers to those types of things. I mentioned this in the last video. We have no idea where the Plushtrap Chaser came from. Who made it? Who tampered with it? We don't know. Is it even actually one of the normal Plushtrap Chasers? We don't know. Was it just is it a normal Plushtrap Chaser, but it was just tampered with, or is it a completely new thing? Hard to say. Okay, let's move on to the Stitchwraith teaser. In this teaser, we meet a man named Grimm. He's a homeless man, and he's watching the Stitchwraith on some train tracks. You can see where this is going. The Stitchwraith is prying the pieces of the plush trap from the train tracks. Andrew, one of the kids, infected items with his anger, and now they're looking for items that were infected with his anger. Is the plush trap one of them? I could see it being so, because I don't know why the Stitchwraith would be looking for the plush trap otherwise. And so the plush trap is looking for these items, and it's putting them in a bag, and then it disappears. And then we go back to Detective Larson from the first story, and he's going to a woman's house, an old woman, it seems. She's just seen better days, and so what she says is that we used to take care of this house for the man who owned it, and she took care of his kid. The kid got sick, and then they died. It never says whether the kid had died or whether the man who owned the house died. Maybe both, but now she's just in charge of the house with a ton of cats. And so Larson's going through the house. He's looking to see if there's anything here that'll help with his investigation. And at the end of the story here, he shows her a picture, a lead for the case. And as soon as this woman, Margie, sees it, it says that her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly, he heard her breathing quicken. And then Larson he opens a cabinet, and there's this black writing scrawled all over it. Black drawings, scribbles, all over the cabinet. And it's never said what this is, because that's when the epilogue cuts off. And even though we've gotten 2 books since that one, we still don't know what those writings were. It says that there's similar writings on the Stitchwraith, all over its masks, so that could be what it is. I think that is what it is. The writings on the mask of the Stitchwraith are similar, or came from the same place as the writing on the cupboard. But still, in 2 books, we still don't know what that was. I'm sure we'll find out, but it's taken a little while. As for what the Stitchwraith is doing with the plush trap, who knows? We don't know. We have no idea. I'm sure we'll find out. I think it is just looking for these items that Andrew infected with his anger, whatever that means. We still don't know what that means, but I think that's what it's doing. And maybe that's where the monsters in these books come from Andrew, or Fetch. Maybe Fetch was the first one. We don't know. We have no idea. And that's why it's so hard to talk about these teasers at the moment, because we still don't have much of an idea as to what they are. But we'll find out. We'll see. Alright, I think I'm going to end off the video there. We've been talking for a good long time, longer than the last video for sure. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. I'm a YouTuber, so I have to say these things. It's in the contract. And I'll see you guys next time.